Hello, another podcast with My Energy Game. And this time we're going to be working on train your confidence. Very excited about this one. Mike Porteous, how are you?
Hi there, Du. Yeah, I'm great, thanks. Thanks so much for inviting me along. It's great.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for being with us, Mike. So, Mike is an endurance and sports coach, particularly working on triathlon and swimming and big events. And basically, his belief is about confidence and self belief. Over the last few years, he has been developing an approach to coaching that brings confidence to the center of great coaching practices. So, basically, your thing, Mike, is about confidence and self belief. um, can we train confidence? Is there because when we talk, especially in our world in football, when we talk a lot about confidence. We talk, we measure, we quantify confidence. We tell players whether they're confident or not. But I don't think we actually train confidence that much. I don't think we really work on it. So, what's your belief?
No, well, it's exactly that thing that sparked my interest when I was going through the qualifications to be particularly a triathlon coach. Exactly like you say, people talk all the time about confidence and about, oh, so and so was doing this big event and they're so well trained, but it didn't happen because they didn't have the confidence. Um, but it's almost like it becomes the thing that explains why things work, but it never gets explained itself. Well, it's like this mysterious thing that some people have and some people don't, and we never really kind of get a hold of, well, why is that and what's going on. And the approach that I've developed by looking at a lot of sports psychology, but primarily just from the people that I work with, the people who come to prepare for big events, big endurance events. It's rooted in trying to understand the feelings, what's actually going on. When this is one of the things, I'm not so sure people say or really feel confidence. They feel the lack of it when it's not there. But when someone would say, oh, if this person is confident, actually what they're feeling, I think is something rather different. And the approach I developed tries to single out three particular things that make up that kind of that magical thing that explains why things happen the way they do. And the first is all about excitement. It's about going to an event with this kind of, it's like a thrilled anticipation of what's going to happen. So it's not saying I can guarantee I'm going to win or I'm going to get through this. Or it's not that kind of, I would say, a bit arrogant guarantee. It's more an excitement about just being there. Wow, I'm here. And this is something that I think as a coach, you can help people steer towards. So excitement is one key feeling. A second one is all about control. And here's where I think, the kind of, if you like, the technique, the technical expertise of a coach can really be supportive to help someone focus on how do they go into an event feeling like they're as well prepared as they could possibly be. So I spend a lot of time with my athletes. We think through every conceivable thing to prepare for that event. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't talk about football because you're the expert, but I imagine there's a lot of work goes in before a game about analyzing the opponents and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But it's not like a kind of control, like a control freak would have, of understand, trying to be on top of every single detail. Detail is important, but it comes with a sense of being at ease about the things that you can't control, of understanding, well, I can't do much about, whatever it might be. but I'm going to be so well prepared for those things that are in my control. So that excitement, sense of control, and then I do a lot of work around what I call fluency.
Fluency, that's an
Which is
interesting term.
fluency, yeah. And I think that sits beautifully with the work you're doing on energy. It's that sense of being so present in the moment, so focused that everything is just kind of flowing. So in swimming, it's your whole movement through the water. It just feels in balance. Things just flow. So I do a lot of work around trying to help people prepare, and for them to feel attuned to what those feelings are. So it doesn't come from me as the coach waving my hands around and telling them they should feel something. It has to be rooted in their own experience.
So you are only the channel to kind of like say, hey, actually we can train confidence. If you've ever been told that you are not a confident person, or if you felt that you were lacking of confidence because something didn't click for you, hey, don't worry, this can be trained, this can be work. And there are these three main pillars that have developed your approach of coaching, which are obviously the excitement, the control, the fluency, and you've explained it beautifully, Mike. I mean, and it's funny because listening to you, I was kind of thinking, wow, we are talking about joy. We are talking about being at ease. We are talking about being present,
Yeah,
and those are things that obviously we believe a lot in our platform, in My Energy Game, um, and 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 I believe that we don't do enough at times as coaches, and certainly we don't help athletes to help themselves enough around these three key factors, these three pillars that can help them a lot with their confidence.
yeah,
Um, so give us some examples of when you work with your athletes, and of course obviously you are an endurance sports coach, so you work more with people who do triathlons, duathlons, big events. I mean, but still, I mean, same as football, I mean, we also obviously work on confidence as such. So what examples can you give us of how do you
right,
work with them?
right. Um, well, there's two actually. Before I get into the two things, one thing I go on about
Yeah.
is I just don't believe in like kind of a one size fits all magic formula, top tips that work for everyone.
Yeah.
Now, my whole approach, like many coaches, it starts with the uniqueness of the person in front of me. So I have to understand, how they see the particular challenge, what they're bringing to it, what it means for them, all those things. So I don't. It's not like I think, oh, I have some magic words that will work with everyone every time. As you were saying, it has to come from the athlete. It has to be true to themselves. So a big part of coaching, I think, is helping. Well, is me understanding that and being attuned, and then figuring out, okay, how can we work towards our event. But there's probably two big kind of steps along the way, I think. One is to, again, thinking about understanding what a challenge means for someone. For quite a lot of people who come, it's almost like the finish line defines success for them. So what do I mean by that? I mean, some people might come and say, oh, I could never do this big event. Maybe they don't even want to try. They think, if I don't do a certain time, or I get beaten by whoever, or some people say, oh, I'm going to come last. That's almost like saying, well, the finish defines the whole experience. But that's an awful way to think, in my view. So we do quite a lot of just talking things through and understanding, why that might be. And then there's something a phrase I sometimes use. I say, well, let's bring the finish line to the start.
I
And
like
let's
that.
make part of the definition of success is how you're feeling at the start line. And it goes back to those other things, how excited are you? How much do you feel like you've controlled just about everything? You're as ready as you could possibly be. And then the magical bit is you think about the space between the start and the finish becomes almost like it's like a kind of a blank canvas for a painter. You're going to paint your masterpiece in that space. And that's where the flow and the fluency all comes into its own. And there's a beautiful phrase a US sports psychologist called Michael Gervais talks about. He talks about creating your living masterpiece. That space between the start line and the finishing line is there for your living masterpiece, where everything is going to click and flow. And
I mean, this listening to you, Mike. Sorry to interrupt you, but I mean, there is so much similarity between what you do and football. And that was our concern at first, right? We said, well, but you are an endurance sports coach and I work with triathlons. And obviously we have a big event every X amount of months and you guys have a game every 3 days. But no, but what you've described there, it's when we cross the line to go on the pitch, that's our starting. And then that in between, that crossing the line after coming out of the tunnel and the final whistle of the game, that is our time, obviously, to that blank canvas, that idea of fluency there, that idea of expressing myself, that idea of really living the game.
yeah.
I what I normally say to my players is live the game. Don't just play it, live it. That's so there is a really strong connection with this. And what was the second bit?
Yeah, the second thing is, and this is the nature of endurance sports events, no doubt, like football too. Sometimes it can be really overwhelming. Sometimes things really hurt. Someone doing a really big, epic, long event, you're pretty much guaranteed at some point it's really going to be tough. So we do a lot of work around, sports psychologists would call it switching.
Switching, okay.
Where you switch your focus. And there's a way you can kind of map it out. And again, I do this with my athletes. We think about it as a grid. We say there's narrow and there's wide, and there's internal and external. So let's take an example. Yeah, someone shows up for the biggest triathlon they've ever done. Maybe it's an Ironman, for example. Yeah. So they come in with all their nerves and thinking, oh, can I do this? And it's so noisy and hyped up. There's thousands of people there. Everyone seems to have a more expensive bike than they do. So it's like this wide, external, big environment is impacting on them and making them feel really, really small. And even though they might be terrifically well prepared, suddenly that feeling is going. So we do some thinking about, well, how could you switch your focus from that big, wide, external kind of noise, if you like, to something which is much more narrow. So like a key part for doing a triathlon will be just how you're going to set up your equipment in your little space. You're given a little space where you put your bike and your shoes and all that stuff. So for those moments, I'm going to get people to just narrow down the focus to that one space. Or maybe they're thinking about, they're particularly someone who's a bit nervous about the swim. So they're stood there at the start line and they see all these thousands of people and the waves and the big distance in front of them, but we're going to narrow things down just to the space in front of them. Maybe small space as where their hand is coming in the water, or the little pocket of air to the side where they breathe. So we've gone from really wide to really narrow. And in that process, they end up feeling like I can control this. I can be on top of my breathing. I know where my hand is coming in or whatever. Yeah.
It's an interesting, it's a very interesting concept on switching, narrowing the focus to try to kind of like get yourself at ease when you feel overwhelmed by whatever might be. Obviously, you've put some examples of what can happen in triathlon. In football, could be I'm playing with the first team. I'm not playing, and all of a sudden now I've been given a chance to play today after not having played a few games, and I do feel overwhelmed by it because I don't know whether I'm gonna respond and I'm gonna keep my shirt or any other overwhelming, um, circumstances. And could be an example of, well, I'm gonna narrow it down. I'm gonna just focus on striking my pass, doing my basics right, and then from there I'll grow into the game. So
Yeah.
there is
Yeah.
so I do love this idea of switch and narrowing the focus to try to kind of like tackle that feeling of overwhelm.
Yeah. And it can work the other way as well. So maybe um, uh, someone might be in the swim and they're getting really, really tired and they're feeling so much fatigue, and maybe suddenly they get a cramp, or maybe someone bashes them on the head and their goggles come a bit loose. So it's like suddenly, in a moment, all your attention has gone to this very narrow spot. But again, if you've prepared, if you've thought about it before, you can almost be ready intuitively to switch your focus to maybe something wider.
Interesting. Yeah.
I've had this experience of swimming in a big event and getting cramp, and I know if I just can switch the focus away from that point of cramp to the environment around me, it just helps the body relax. I can get back into the flow. I can then start thinking about the movement, that's one stroke following the other, and before I know it, what felt like a terrible and kind of dreadful, something hitting me hard, just becomes a bit of a memory, becomes part of the story that I'm going to tell to people when I've finished. Right?
So
And
Mike,
I get my athletes to before the event, we draw up this grid. I don't tell them what they should put in it, but I ask them to think about, what are you going to be thinking about in each of those, narrow, wide, external, internal, and rehearse it, in your swim, in your run, in your whatever. Rehearse it, play around with it, so that when it comes to the event, it just happens in a nice kind of, almost like a kind of effortless, unconscious way.
I'm so grateful, Mike, with this conversation. I mean, we met a couple of weeks ago. You are based in Brighton, and we had that conversation about train your confidence. And I thought, how exciting is this? And yeah, you've proved. I mean, I hope the athletes listening to and the coaches out there listening to this podcast can actually now start to understand that confidence is not that big word that we can only use to quantify and to judge people, really, because at least in my environment it's more about, oh, she or he is not confident, so we better not play them, right? Rather than work on it. And these three pillars of, the excitement, the control, the fluency, and then this idea of switching in between narrowing and wider focus to kind of like tackle any overwhelming circumstances, and obviously empowering the athlete. I mean, always kind of like, making sure that we, the coaches, are just, someone who is there to guide them when they feel a bit lost, but mainly it's for them. It's them working on it. um, Thank you so much, Mike. I mean, it's terrific. I mean, hopefully people now have a big idea about, a more key factors and details to kind of work on their confidence. And of course, if they need more, um, I believe you have you have some resources. You have a website, zigzagconfidence.com.
That's right. Yeah, I set up a site for coaches from across all sports, not just triathlon or swimming. Um, and it's called Confidence Centered Coaching.
Uh-huh.
Uh, it's free. Any coach can dip in.
Nice.
Um, and as you say, the URL is zigzagconfidence.com.
So thank you so much, Mike.
Pleasure. Great to chat with you, Edu.
Same here.
Ciao.
Ciao.